I'm Grandma Phyllis, and this is Harley. I have over 30 years of experience in transforming people's lives, and I have a master's in hypnotherapy. And today we're going to discuss a real-life story of the use of hypnosis and a positive outcome that will really amaze you. The story begins a few years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, with a young lady coming to me wanting to have a hypno session to help her get over her fear of taking tests. She wanted to become a railway conductor, and she'd taken the tests a couple of times and had failed each one. She clutched when she took a test. So we had a session. I think it was one session in which she was given the suggestion to be over the fear, whatever the fear was. We went to the origin of the fear of when she took a test, and she remembered something from school way back in the early days of her education. And ever since then, she'd had clutched up on tests. So we went down, and she cleared it up. She took the test a couple of weeks later. She called me and said, "Guess what? I passed. And I did a good job. I passed with flying colors, a very good grade." Great success story. Well, now we move to another one where she said, "Could you help me get over my fear of going over bridges?" She said, "I get so anxious and so uptight. I can't cross a bridge. Sometimes on a longer bridge, I have to have someone get out and drive me over because I can't drive over the bridge." So I said, "Not a problem." So we went down again, and I say we because it's a collaborative effort between you and me. And you have to have a rapport with the therapist and the person who is getting the therapy. And it's very important to have that rapport. And so it becomes a we, because we're both working on her healing, just so you know. At any rate, I took her down, and she went to the origin of her fear of going over bridges, driving over bridges particularly. And what arose from that was the story of when she was about 3 years old, and her father was an alcoholic, and there was a lot of abuse as a result in the family. And it would appear that one day when the father was driving the family of 5 children and mom, and he got very angry, and he stopped in the middle of a bridge, and he got out and demanded all the children and his wife get out. And then he threw his 11-year-old son over the bridge and into the water below. And thankfully it wasn't that deep, and the boy wasn't hurt. And he climbed up the embankment and came back up, and he was threatening to throw the other children. And the family, he ordered them back in the car or to come to him, and the children wouldn't. And he drove off angrily, and the family, and with the mom, elected to walk back home. And that was her fear, the beginning of her fear of bridges. And you can understand why. So we fast forward now, and she's now a woman of middle years, shall we say. And we take her, while she was in this hypnosis therapy, we took her to meet with her father. It's called a family healing. And we took her to meet her father. She called him to her, actually, and he came. And they met in the unconscious level. For when you're there, it's as real as anything else. You are actually feeling in real time. You are actually in spirit, in another dimension, when you are in this hypnotic state. And they had a discussion. And when she quizzed her father about why he had done this, why he had treated them this way, he expressed sorrow. And what he said was, well, this is the way his father treated him. And as far as he knew, it's the way his grandfather treated his father. And so this is how he treated his family and his wife. And this is why he became an alcoholic, because it's what he knew. But he said now he understood what it was that had been so wrong. And he apologized to her. And she said he was crying when he did, and asked her forgiveness for what he had done. And she said she forgave him. And she started crying in her trance, as can happen. These are real emotions that people express because you are in real time on another plane of existence. And the two of them apologized to each other. They asked forgiveness, and her father left to go where he is, and she came back, and she was crying uncontrollably for a while, and it was okay. We calmed her down and gave her the suggestion, before she came fully out of that she would now be healed, that she felt free, and she felt as though a great burden had lifted from her shoulders, and she felt free inside and felt so much better, that she now understood why her father did it, and she could forgive him. And when she came back out, I gave her the suggestion, as I do with everyone, when they come back out, to remember what they have gone through, and also that now that she understood where the fear came from, she no longer would be afraid. She could drive over any bridge, anytime, anywhere, easily and comfortably. And when she came out, she was fine. And she felt so much better. She felt as though the world had been lifted off her shoulders. And here's a little thing we can tell you right now. When you come out of hypnosis, if you look in the mirror, you will find, unless you're a child or a really young person, you'll find you've dropped about 10 years off your life, which is written on your face. And you look so much younger, and you look so much brighter. And people go away happy, at least most people, knowing they look 10 years younger. And that's, if that does nothing else, it makes people feel happy. That's one of the tells you can see from someone who's been in hypnosis or someone who's pretended. If you pretended, you don't have that look. And there are some other techniques which I won't explain now, and because I don't want someone to think they can go in and fake it, because you really can't. Your body does physiological changes when you undergo hypnosis. So keep that in mind. And the other thing is, a few days later, she called me and she said, "Mrs. Pricer, guess what?" And I said, "What?" She said, "I drove over a bridge, and I was over the bridge almost before I knew it, before I realized I was driving over a bridge without any fear at all." And she said, "I just had to call and tell you as soon as possible to let you know that I drove over a bridge for the first time." And fantastic. And as far as I know, she's never had a problem since. Now, there's a second portion to this story, which is even more phenomenal, and I almost get tears when I tell it. She called me a few weeks later, and she mentioned to me that her older brother, who was 11 at the time, was the one who her father threw over the bridge. And he himself had become an alcoholic, had married and had children, was just about like the dad was, abusive, unkind, did things that were just really not acceptable. And he had had a stroke, and it left him a little bit shaken. He was in his late 60s, early 70s, I think, at the time. And he wanted to know if he could undergo hypnosis. And I said, "Sure, be glad to." And he did come shortly thereafter. And he proved to be a good subject. He went under the first time we met. In fact, I think it's the only time we met. And in that, he went back to that traumatic event when I put him under. And he saw himself at that time. And again, we worked with a family healing modality. And the father did come again in this other plane of unconscious reality or dimension. And they discussed, as I said before, with the young lady, about what had happened and why his father did that. And his father's explanation again was he didn't know why he did that he had been abused and had learned to be an alcoholic from his father, and he apologized to his son profusely and told him how sorry he was. And the gentleman forgave his father. Again, there was this mutual forgiveness, an aha, an understanding on an emotional, primal level that just happens in hypnosis so very quickly. And he asked again, and they forgave each other. And the father left. And when I brought the gentleman a little bit forward in time and asked him to forgive himself for anything he had done in his lifetime, for anyone he had hurt in his lifetime. But again, forgiving oneself, even if you don't really understand what you're forgiving yourself for, is very cathartic. And when I brought him up, he was crying. And again, he was letting things loose. Now, all of these hypnosis therapies that I take people on are recorded. And at the time, I was using tapes. So the tape went home with the gentleman. And today, in the recording you do on the phone, you take your own recording with you so that I do not keep your medical stories with me, but they remain private and in your hands. But having said that, I move forward to hearing about 6 weeks later, this young lady called me and she said, Mrs. Pricer, I have some news to give you. And I said, okay, what is it? She said, I want you to know that my brother died. He had a severe stroke mixed with a heart attack, I think, and he passed away. But before he passed, I want you to know what you did to change his life. And I said, well, basically he did all the work. So what happened with his life? And she said he went home to his wife and apologized to her. And then he apologized to his children and to any other family member that he had hurt during his lifetime, because he was an alcoholic and was so verbally and emotionally abusive, and even physically at times. And she said he changed 180% of the way he behaved and acted before he died. She said it was the most amazing transformation I have ever seen. And when he died happy. He played your tape, or the tape of the recording, so much that he broke it. And he was the kindest, gentlest, most courteous person you would ever want to meet. We hardly knew him because the change was so profound in him before he left. And he reconciled with all of his family before he left. And I wanted you to know that that hypnosis session helped him in his last hours and helped his family too. And I have to say that it's not I who do this work. It is a person themselves who come in, who do the work in hypnosis. I am so happy to have heard that story, and it has remained with me among one of the most satisfactory for me outcomes for someone who has come as a client to see me. And something like this, I think, needs to be shared for people to understand that this is a transformative process which can bring such peace and harmony back into your life if you will let it. And this hypnosis can be used on just about anything. And so I hope that this explains in more dramatic terms what hypnosis is and how it can make a transformation in your life or the life of others who have need of it. If you would like to book a session, my information is in the description box. Thank you for listening, and do come back.